This summer, I'm going to take our congregation through the whole Bible. So 2 weeks ago, we started with an era. I'm getting this from a book called 30 Days to Understanding the Bible by Max Anders. And it divides the Bible up into 12 eras. And if you're interested in taking a look at the book, you're welcome to. I have this book up here. And I don't know if there are any more copies there by you, Randy, or not. But there's some copies of this that I had. Nope, they're already gone from first service. So. But if you're welcome to use this, and I'll get some more books so you can use them as well. If you want a book, they're $17, and you can just put it into the plates. And if you don't have enough for that, I don't care. I'd like you to know the Bible. So the very first era is the era of creation. The era of creation is, you'll find it in the book of what? Anyone know? Genesis, thank you. What does the word Genesis mean? Beginning. All right, so God creates everything, and there is the crown of creation. What is the crown of creation? Man. The crown of creation. Why we're calling it the crown of creation? Well, we don't call it the crown. God calls it that because we are created in God's image. We are created in the image of God. Now, for me, what that means is God gives us the ability to make decisions. You see, if we were all following God's will, God would just wind us up at the very beginning and everybody would do exactly what God wants you to do. Well, we know living in this world that everybody doesn't do what God exactly wants us to do. God said, I love you so much that I'm going to give you the ability to love me or to abandon me. I'm going to give you the ability to follow in my will or you can stray from my will. See, that is love. God puts it out there for us to make our own decision. And when we follow God, we're showing God love. But it's up to us. Now, we know the story of Adam and Eve, right? Adam and Eve are in the garden, and God said you can eat any of the fruit except for the one that's right there in the middle, the forbidden tree. And most of you know, how many of you know what I think the forbidden fruit is? Tomatoes. Very good. I think that's very true. Okay, I don't care. It doesn't say in the Bible what it is. I'm sure it's tomatoes. Regardless, when they eat that fruit, the problem is not that they eat fruit. The problem is that when they eat that fruit, they believe that they will be God. That, my friends, is called idolatry. And God said, you can't continue to live in the garden. So he kicks them out of the garden. Do you remember... To Adam, he says, you're going to have trouble farming. To Eve, he says, you're going to have trouble bearing children. And to Satan, he says that you'll always be in constant disagreement with humankind. So here we are, and God says, just go out there and follow my will. Well, Adam and Eve, they have kids, and their kids have kids, and their kids have kids. And what happens is that sin just keeps exploding over and over and over again. And God just goes, let's start different. And so he calls a righteous man. His name is Noah. And he says, Noah, I want you to start building an ark. Now remember, there's been no rain before. There's been nothing like that. No one needs a boat. So everybody thinks that Noah's kind of crazy, but he keeps on doing it. And God says, all right, it's time to put in the boat not only your family, but I want you to save part of creation as well. So God commands Noah to save some of the animals. They all get into the boat, and then we have this rain that comes from the top side. And the Bible says we also have this spring of water that just comes up and bubbles up from the bottom. And for how many days does the rain happen? 40. How many nights? 40. It's important for you to remember that number 40 because it repeats itself throughout the Bible. Whenever 40 happens, you should know that something negative is going to happen. Okay? How many of you are turning 40 this year? See, that's the problem. All right. So here we are. There is a rain that floods the whole earth, and then when that's done, God says, I'll never do that again. He puts a symbol up there. He puts the sign of the rainbow, right, as a covenant between God and us. So God's going to keep the covenant. He says, I'll never have that happen again. So when the water subsides, Noah gets this instruction from God. God says, Noah, I want you to go forth and multiply. And Noah has selective hearing, and so he does the multiplication, right? And I'm not talking 2 times 2, right? Do you all know what multiplication is? Remember, Noah is up there in years, so I don't care how old you are, friends. Multiplication, having children. But they aren't good at going forth. They just stick around. Then Noah's families, they keep having children and so forth. And finally, the humankind goes, we are so good, we're going to build ourselves a monument to us. So they start building themselves a monument. God says, So he confuses their languages, and that's at the Tower of Babel. And then the people can't talk to each other the way they did before. And so finally the people go and populate other parts of the earth. So we have just covered the first 11 chapters of Genesis. So that was a couple Sundays ago. Last Sunday, we talked about what holiday did we celebrate last Sunday? Father's Day. How many of you actually got your dad anything? Yeah, that's what I figured. Yes, I saw. Abby got me something. All right. Yeah. That's because we switched Father's Day and Mother's Day. So last week was Mother's Day for us. Regardless, it's Father's Day. Did you know that, I don't know what the statistics are, but people spend a lot more on Mother's Day than they do on Father's Day. I don't know. I was talking to Joe over there. You spent Father's Day at Chuck E. Cheese, right? At your behest, I'm sure. All right. So, patriarch just means father. The first of the patriarchs is a guy named, anyone know? Abraham, Father Abraham. So here we are in the 12th chapter of Genesis. God says to Abraham, his name is Abram at that point. God says to Abram, I want you to go from the land of Ur, and I want you to go to the land of Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey. Now, Abram is not a monotheist, so he believes in all kinds of gods, but he's now being asked by God to go from the place that he calls home and to go to this place he never knows before. Now, he and his wife Sarai have no children as of yet, and God says to Abraham, I'm going to give you land. I am going to give you progeny, children. I am going to give you blessings. So Abram goes out and he starts his journey to the land of what we know now as Israel, but he's saying go to the land of Canaan. Now, Abram is, both of them are in their 80s at least. And once they reach the land, God comes to, Abram is in a tent, and Sarah is at a back tent somewhere, and God comes in the form of an angel. And they're having a meal together, and then the angel says to Abram, you are going to have children. And back there, Sarah is back, and she laughs. What? Remember, there's no Cialis or Viagra or anything yet, so she's laughing back there. And the angel says, hey, did I hear you laugh? Oh, no, I didn't laugh. I didn't. Yes, you did. By this time next year, you will be with child. And sure enough, it happened. And they had a child. And when their son came out, they named him Isaac because it means laughter. Isaac grows up a bit, and remember, God says to Abram, I want you to take Isaac, and I want you to go up the mountain. So Abram, I imagine that he had trouble with this. I know I would. And he says, go kiss your mom, and we're going, Isaac. So on the way up to the mountain, Isaac turns to his dad, and he says, Dad, I thought we were going to bring a sacrifice to God. Where's the sacrifice? And Abram looks at his son, and he just says, the Lord will provide. So they get up to the top of the mountain, and Abram begins to make the sacrifice of his only son. And God stops him and says, This is not what I want. Unbind your son, and there in the thicket you'll find a ram. So there in the thicket they found this ram, and they bound the ram, and then they made a sacrifice. So they substituted Isaac, and the ram was a substitute. And the ram then served as the sacrifice. Now, it's my prayer that you're kind of getting this, that you're going to see this a little bit later on in the Bible, but so just nod your head, make me feel better, that you understand what's going on there. They come back down the mountain, and Isaac grows up. He gets married to Rebekah. They have a pair of twins. First one who comes out is really hairy. His name is Esau. And right on his heel, literally right on his heel, is Jacob, grabbing his heel. Jacob's name means trickster. And Jacob wants to be number one, and and Esau is the firstborn son. In fact, Esau is such a person that his dad really likes Esau. Esau likes the country life. You know, he likes hunting and fishing and all that kind of stuff. Going up to the boundary waters, that's what Esau likes to do. I'm not sure where the boundary waters would be at that point or not, but anyway. And Jacob, he likes to stay at home. He's more of a video game kind of guy. And when Jacob or Esau comes in, he's been hunting and he's famished, and Jacob's been watching the cooking channel, remember? And he says, I really have this great stuff. And Esau says, I'd love some. And Jacob says, well, I'd love to give you some, but you need to promise me your birthright. And Esau says, well, yeah, whatever. And so he eats that, and he loses his inheritance. The firstborn would get everything. But it's important for you to know that Esau is a man of his word as well. Now, Isaac gets up there in age. He wants to bless his son Esau. He wants to give him a blessing. Isaac can't see anymore. He's blind. And so he calls Esau to his side. He said, Esau, go out, find some wild game for me. You know how I love it. And when you come back, I will give you a blessing. So he does just that. But Jacob, in the meantime, here's what's going on. So he dresses up like Esau, and he steals the blessing from Esau. Well, he knows that he can't live there any longer, because not only is his dad mad, Isaac, but also Esau is going to be awfully upset. So he runs off to Uncle Laban's house. He gets to Uncle Laban's house. There's this woman who's at the well, and he's smitten. Loves her. Her name is Rachel. So it's Uncle Laban's daughter. And so he said, I want to marry your daughter. Uncle Laban goes, well, yes, you can marry my daughter, but you're going to have to work hard first. So he works hard for 7 years, and then they have this nice marriage, and all of a sudden, so the bride is coming down the aisle. This is the really living version. And the bride's coming down the aisle, and she's got a veil on, and Jacob lifts the veil, and it's not Rachel. It's Leah, the oldest daughter. And he goes, I was looking for Rachel. Now, can you imagine what Leah's doing? You're going to marry me. Uncle Laban says, you can marry Rachel as well. It's another 7 years. So Jacob labors another 7 years, and he and Rachel get married. Now, Jacob has a number of kids. He has 12 sons. Now, we're going to begin to know them as the 12 tribes of Israel. But he has 12 sons, and he has one who is his absolute favorite. His absolute favorite is Joseph. We know he's a favorite because he gets this coat of many colors. The other brothers are not enamored with Joseph. Joseph tends to be a little arrogant. Okay, so they said, well, we're going to get rid of him. We're going to take him out in the field, put him down in the cistern, and then come back and tell Dad that he died. Oh, in fact, let's say that he was murdered by a goat. We'd love, of all the things, murdered by a goat. How would you like to have that on your tombstone? Well, instead of being murdered by a goat, they saw some Ishmaelites coming past, so they say, well, we should make a little money off of our little brother, so let's sell him off into slavery. They go back into town. They tell Jacob that, yep, he was murdered by a goat. Here's this blood-stained coat. And Jacob is just beside himself. He's crying and crying, And Joseph then is carted off to the land of Egypt. So he's going from Canaan, and he's going to the land of Egypt. Now, when he gets to Egypt, the Ishmaelites sell him off to Potiphar. Potiphar is a governor over there, and Potiphar has a wife who thinks that Joseph is quite hot. And when I say hot, I'm not thinking like he has a fever. I'm thinking like hot, like Donny Osmond hot, okay? That's who plays him in the right? Donny Osmond hot. So, So she is really wanting Joseph. And Joseph says, I know what side my bread is buttered on. No way are we going to do anything. And she said, well, you will, or you'll pay the punishment one way or the other. He says, no. So she cries rape. Joseph is thrown into the slammer, and he remains there. Now, a little bit later, years later, Pharaoh, who is the king of all of Egypt, he has a couple of his officials who are also thrown into jail. Now, those officials have had some dreams, and they're trying to figure out what these dreams mean. Now, Joseph has had some experience in these dreams. So he says to them, I can tell you what your dreams mean. It won't be me. God speaks through me. Tell me what your dreams are. He does, and one of those officials goes back to Pharaoh's company. Now, when he goes back, Joseph says, just remember who I am. Could you get me out of prison? And the official says, sure, I'll speak to the king. He doesn't. And Joseph is there for a number of more years until Pharaoh has a dream. Pharaoh has a dream about cows. Okay, he must have worked for Cargill. And there's these cows that are fat, and then there's these cows that are skinny. And so nobody can figure out these dreams. And this official says, hey, I met this guy back in prison. He's probably still there. His name is Joe. Why don't you call for him? So he calls for Joe. Joe says to Pharaoh, Pharaoh, I can tell you what your dreams mean. Not me. God is going to speak through me. Tell me what your dreams are. He tells him what the dreams are. And Joseph says this, there are going to be 7 years of good times. Things are going to go like they never went before. And then it's going to follow on 7 years of famine. Pharaoh goes, wow. Joseph says, so you need to take the good times and to store up because there are going to be 7 years of bad times. And Pharaoh says, sounds like you know what you're doing. Joseph, I'm going to put you in charge. Joseph, who was just in the slammer. Joseph, who is not an Egyptian. He is now Egypt's number 2. Back in Canaan. Jacob is there, and they are starving to death. And there's these rumors that are coming, saying that Egypt still has food. So Jacob sends some of the brood over there to Egypt and says, find out if there's food and find out if we can have some. And Joseph recognizes his brothers. And so after he plays a couple of tricks, all of his family, Jacob and his family, make the journey from Canaan over into Egypt. And there they stay. Now, it's important for you to recognize where Egypt is because Egypt becomes this place of refuge for foreigners. We're going to find that a little bit later on when we read the Gospels. But here we are at the end of Genesis. So we went from Genesis 1 through 11, which was the era of the creation. Who's the main dude of the creation? Adam. All right, we're going to go. God would be the main dude always, but let's not put dude on there. And then we go, and that's happening in the Garden of Eden. And then the era of what? What's next after creation? Patriarchs. Who's the first patriarch? Who's the first patriarch? Wonderful. It's getting better. Who's the first patriarch? Wonderful. Who's next after him? Isaac. Laughter. Ha ha ha. Okay. Abraham is first. Who's second? Isaac. And then who's next? Jacob, the trickster. And who's the favorite son of Jacob's? Joseph. All right. Now I want you to, if you have a Bible or if you can pick one up in front of you, I want you to go to the very end of Genesis and to the very beginning of Exodus. So the very end of Genesis, the very beginning of Exodus, if you don't know, they're right next to each other. And I want you to take that one page and hold it into your hand. So the one page. Now for me, I have to hold just the first page of Exodus because Genesis and Exodus are in two different pages. But I want you to hold one page in your hand. Now on that page, I want you to make it feel like this page is heavier than you've ever felt before. Because this page is more than 400 years in time. When you flip from Genesis to Exodus, you've got more than 400 years in your hand. Now let's go to Exodus. So when we last left the story, Jacob and his family are there in Egypt. And what's going on there is that Pharaoh says, I'm going to welcome all of you. And so all of them are welcomed, and they are welcomed within Egypt. But as time goes on and administrations change, and we have more than one king that dies, right? We have got 400 years that are going on. How many presidents have we gone through in 200 plus years? So think about that in terms of kings. And then this is what this king says. These Israelites, they're very prolific. They have a lot of kids. We need to thin them out because I'm afraid that there will be more Israelites than there will be Egyptians. And so this king calls some of the midwives who work with the Hebrews, and he says to the midwives, whenever you have a Hebrew woman and she's going to bring out her kid, you're helping her with the birth. If it's a son, I want you to get rid of it. If it's a daughter, she can stay. But the sons, we need to get rid of. Well, the Israelites, these midwives decide that they are not going to follow the law. And so these kids are still multiplying. But in the midst of that, it just means that all those Hebrew women, whenever they had a son, they knew that his life was at risk. So there's this woman, her name is Jochebed, and she has a son. And she tries, well, they keep their son. But as he gets too old, he's a baby, he's probably 3 months. They said, okay, we can't keep him anymore. It will be found out. So what she does is she makes this cradle and puts it with pitch on the bottom so it can float, and she puts it into the river. Now, she is no dummy. She's been watching. She's been watching Pharaoh's castle. So she knows right where to put that child. It says that they put the child in the reeds. Has anyone ever walked in reeds before? Anyone hunters? You know, when you walk with reeds, they just don't just bend wherever you want. They have a little force of their own. They're going to keep that kid right there. And so Pharaoh's daughter comes out, finds the child. She knows it's a Hebrew. But Moses' mother is no dummy. She sends her daughter out, Miriam, go out, and when Pharaoh's daughter sees how cute Moses is, you tell her that you'll know somebody who can raise this child up for her and bring it back to her. That's what happens. So Moses goes back to his mom for a while. Eventually, Moses then goes to the palace. And he is raised in Egyptian ways. Now, Moses, after a while, sees that what's going on with his people is wrong. What he tries to do is he tries to right a wrong with a wrong. I can tell you that it doesn't work. He commits murder. And he runs out. He goes out to the wilderness. He finds himself a wife. They have some kids. And then all of a sudden there is this bush on the mountain that keeps burning, and it doesn't look like the bush ever burns up. Has anyone ever seen Cecil B. DeMille's 10 Commandments? Yeah, there you go. It's always on at Easter. If you talk to a Jew person, they're going to say it's on at Passover. But for us, it's always on at Easter. I remember it would drive my parents nuts because that's 3 and some hours long. But I watched it every single time. Every year it came on, that and The Wizard of Oz. Not at the same time. God says to Moses, Moses, take off your sandals, for this is hallowed ground. Now, I don't remember this in Cecil B. DeMille because Moses is basically arguing with God. God says, I want you to go free my people. And Moses says, I'd love that too, but no, not me. God says, yes, you're going to go. Moses says, you got the wrong person. I don't talk well. I don't want to lead. I'm really bad at that. And Moses finally succumbs to God saying, because God says, Moses, you're going. So he goes to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh lets the people go right away, right? No, that would be a really short movie then at that point. No, we have all the plagues. You remember the last plague, though, is the angel of death. And this is what Moses says to Pharaoh. You let God's people go, or the firstborn of every household will die. Now, when Moses goes to the people of Israel, he says, this is what's going to go on. It will happen to us as well, unless you take a lamb and you sacrifice the lamb, and you take the blood of the lamb and you put it over your doorpost. And when the angel of death comes and sees the blood over the doorpost, then the angel of death will pass over you. So in essence, the blood of the lamb will save you. You're getting that, right? Please say yes. Thank you. Because it's important later on. So Pharaoh finally relents, and Moses leads the people out, and they are leaving Egypt. It says that they plunder Egypt, so they take a bunch of gold and all that kind of stuff, and they get to, and there's a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day that takes them out, and they are right there against the Red Sea, and Pharaoh says, I'm going to go get them and bring them back. So here are all the Israelites. They have gold, but they don't have any army. And here's Pharaoh's army coming at them. And the Israelites say to Moses, what in the heck did you do to us? What are we going to do? And Moses is going, just listen to God. And God says, they don't learn. I just brought them out of Egypt. Do they recognize how difficult that is? All right. And God sends that wind, right, and opens up the Red Sea. The Israelites cross over. The Egyptians are swallowed up in the sea, and the Israelites are over there, and you would think they would go, yeah. But you know what they say? Where's the food? We're hungry. Where are we going to drink anything? Oh, if we were back in Egypt. And Moses goes up to the mountain. And God gives him the law, the 10 Commandments. And when he comes back down the mountain, he sees all of Israel trying to build a golden calf, thinking that somehow that would give them what they wanted. It doesn't. Oh, if only the rebellion ended there, but it doesn't end there. They go, and they're right at the edge of the promised land. And so Moses sends 12 spies into the promised land. 10 of them come back and say, yeah, it's a great place. It's like Florida there, but those people are huge. There's no way that we could ever defeat them. 2 of the spies come back and they said, it's a great land, and those people are huge, but we have a God who's huger. The majority rules. And so for 40 years, they wander around in the wilderness until they get to the very edge of the promised land after 40 years. And that is the end of the book of Exodus. When Moses gives the law, when Moses receives the law of God, Some people have talked to me about, well, why would God create us and then create these laws that are hard for us to keep? Does God just enjoy giving a law and then seeing that we break it and then laugh over us breaking it? Is that why God even initiated them to begin with? I've asked this question before, but when you go up and down Hanson Boulevard, how many different speed zones are there? Too many. Yeah, I like that answer. Too many. And if you and they even change if there's a little light over there by the church, right by Epiphany, then you have to go even slower yet. Now, if you break one of those speed laws, what happens? You get a ticket. Now, my question is, do you think that the city officials decided that the best thing to do is to put a whole bunch of different speed laws in there just because they could make more money off of us getting tickets? Some of you are saying, yes, that's exactly what they did. I mean, especially when it's blinking and there's supposed to be children crossing that road, that's why they made it slower, so that we would pay more attention. God's laws are designed for us, to keep us safe, to keep us from hurt. Every person in this room, and I know I'm not exaggerating, every person in this room has been affected by the breaking of these laws, God's commandments. Let's just take one, for instance. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Now, it may have happened in your own family. It may have happened within the family of your brothers and sisters or cousins or friends. But I can tell you that when that commandment is broken, there is so much hurt that goes along with it. And that's why God institutes these laws for us. They are to protect us. When we don't keep the Sabbath holy, God gives us day of rest. If you work seven days without any rest, you know what? You're going to hurt yourself. Those laws are for us. But God also knows that when we break those laws, we need a way to get right with Him. And we do that through the love and forgiveness of our Savior, Jesus Christ. A sacrifice on our behalf so that we can become one. The story of Exodus is a story that says, yeah, there's going to be pain and suffering. There's no prescription that says, I'm going to save you from all that. We'll have pain and suffering. But what God says is, I will always be there with you, and I will lead you through all things. And all of God's